You will come to order. Angie, can you call the roll?
Commissioner Bunting,
Present.
Commissioner Gay,
Here.
Commissioner Sapsy,
Here.
Commissioner Owens,
Here.
and Commissioner Bailey is absent.
Okay. Tim, could it get you to say the invocation?
Dear Heavenly Father, please be with us as we discuss issues concerning Gratiot County and guide us to the really good conclusions. In Jesus Christ's name, amen.
Amen.
Join us for the pledge of allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Are there any additions or deletions to the agenda?
Yes, so if we can add under J2, the public hearing for the rezoning, for a rezoning request. The public hearing will be on February 7th at 5 here at the courthouse. So that, it doesn't require a motion, it's just in extras. It was added at the end of after the agenda was made. So I just wanted to put that under business. If you have some questions, there will be here to answer those. And then another under extra is a solar presentation that we can add to G2 under communications. It was a whole bunch of slide presentation that Jan and Tim had attended a solar presentation in Saginaw. And that is out there on extras as well, so that you can look at those slide show.
Okay.
So J2 was the resolution for,
J2 was the public hearing for the rezoning request for February 7th. So if you guys have any questions about that, it's for the planning commission to,
I know what it is.
we don't have to make any motions tonight on that. It's just for information, you guys to ask questions if you have any.
Correspond with my J2 on here.
I thought that was a really good report that was sent to us. Gives a lot
We
of
will be
information.
presenting it.
Yeah, I just was really impressed with it.
Okay.
Do I hear a motion to accept the
So
agenda? Moved by Jim, support by Steve. All those in favor say aye.
I,
Brief public comment. No takers. Consideration of the consent calendar. I hear a motion to accept the consent calendar.
Support.
I'll second it.
Okay, moved by Tim, supported by Jan. To approve the consent calendar. All those in favor say aye.
I,
Administrators report. Oh, I skipped over. Do you want to do the solar presentation here?
okay,
G2?
I can talk about that. If you want me to. And, or Tim, did you want to, or you want me to do it?
Well, I was gonna say a few things.
Yeah, go ahead first. Or do you want me to go first?
Should I say the three things I visited since we last met?
No,
Oh,
just talk about the solar. And
Let's
then
talk about the solar.
Yeah, why don't I start it and then you can finish it if you want to do that. Add to it.
All right.
Okay, Tim and I did attend the solar conference there. It was a very unusual meeting. That's the first thing I want to say. Mostly because we had to have a driver's license to get in. Once we were there, we didn't have to show it. But there was only about maybe 30 or 35 people there that even showed up. It was in an auditorium, and the auditorium held probably about 250 to 300 people. We sat in the dark. There was a table that we could write on, but you couldn't really see to write. It was that dark. And everything was up on a stage, and they had these slides. And so the first guy came out, he introduced himself and said that, you know, there's going to be these speakers. And he introduced each speaker. And when he introduced the speaker, that person, the first one was a lady, she came out and it was sort of like she was reading. She just kept reading and reading and reading. When she was done, she said, thank you, and walked off. And that's kind of how this whole thing went. We were not allowed to ask any questions. And I didn't get, there's 110 pages or slides here, but I did not get them all. I decided after a few of the slides, I decided I'd take a picture of them. And so I started taking a picture and then, oh, I don't know, maybe the second person or third person that came on said that they were going to give us all of this information. They had a packet that they would pass out, but we never got any. And it was a long meeting. It was around 4.5 hours long. We were there, Tim and I were there a little after 12 because you had to be there by 12:30. It didn't really start until 1 and it was over by 5:30. We had a 20-minute recess in between there. Otherwise, we sat there and it was just one person after another and another. And the thing that I noticed about it was that at the beginning, it was one way, but towards the end, they had turned it around. And it was like they had said that at the beginning that you could lose value of your home because of the solar energy and because of the wind turbines and stuff. But at the end, they showed a picture of a field and it's in here and it's got a house there and it was, I'll just give you figures. I don't remember the figures. They talked about I think two of them. But it was like $100,000, but they sold it for $135,000. A year later, they sold it again. It was closer to 200,000. And so you really didn't lose the value of it. Now, the other thing was there was 3 people that sat in front of Tim and I. One was a lady and 2 guys, and they're from Shiawassee County. And she asked me, and I'm going to do this, and I'll bring the pictures back. It said, take 57 to 13 and then go south. And they have 800 acres of the solar panels. And she said, the problem with it is, the problem that they are concerned about is that they had a storm and they had hailstones and it broke all these windows. And when it breaks them, there's a chemical in there and there's no way, they have to replace it, but there's no way to replace it. And also she said, if there's ever a fire, the fire department will not, they'll stay and they'll try to make sure it stays contained, but they're not gonna go in there because of the chemicals and because it is that dangerous to try to put it out. And so, one of the questions I had was, if there's chemicals in these windows, it goes down below. And she said underneath them, it's become like a swamp area in areas. Because especially where they're broken, the rain goes down through and it just doesn't dry up. And so my question would have been, what about, when they're all done and they take them down and they go back to farming, what about those chemicals that are going to be into the ground? But we did not allowed to ask any questions. And I think a couple of people shouted out at the very end, a couple of things, and they might have answered, I think maybe 2, but they walked off. And that was it. And I did check on these papers here. I did find a couple of them that I think there was an email on one of them and a phone number. And I have not had time to even try to call those, but it was interesting. I was glad I went. The only thing we should have done was that didn't eat breakfast or lunch, and by 5, they fed us supper by 5:30 at night. Tim and I both were starved. So that was the only thing. We probably should have took a little something in our my purse or whatever. But anyway, it was really interesting. I will say that. I think there was 8 speakers and they went it was one after another. There was no in between. One walked up, one walked on, and they started talking and pretty much they just read. It was whatever they were saying is reading. And when they were reading, they'd have this slide up there. And when they were done with that slide, they would hit another one and start talking about it, hit it and start talking about another one. And so what I wanted to do was write questions down and you have to ask questions after each one, but it never happened. So anyway, that would be the only complaint that I would have had. And what would you like to add to it, Tim?
Well, I know it's a controversial subject. The thing that Stephen were at yesterday, they said both Democrats and Republicans were against this, didn't they?
Yep.
So it was just,
They're against the state taking over the authority to come into, right now it's rule or was ruled by townships, you know, they gave the land use. It's the Republicans and the Democrats that are collectively against the state taking that over and coming in and saying, you know, Tim Gay, your 80 acres, we're gonna we want to put a solar farm there, even if your township doesn't want. That's what they were against, is the state having the authority to come in and take that,
Okay.
that authority, yep.
And they talked a little bit about that, I think, in the beginning too, didn't they? Remember?
I don't know. I would advise my townships to really be careful before they start a solar farm, solar panel farm, and really look into it. Now, the solar panels, I think more of a history, they put it on roofs. Individuals have, and it really economically, it wasn't that sound. But you know, I'll support, of course, I'll support my townships, whatever they do. They're made out of glass and aluminum, solar panels. Jan was right. I don't, they didn't come out and say, we're not gonna take any questions. But you got the impression that questions were really discouraged. And then when we had this really good meal, and these college kids were dressed up like in tuxedos, and they would take your empty plate, fill up your drink and stuff. But none of the speakers were there to question. None of them. And I don't know. I thought it was kind of maybe bribery, like you'd feel so good after the meal that maybe these solar panels aren't so bad.
They did, they put on a nice meal. White.
Well, one thing, this guy, I mean, I had trouble following. I really did. And Jan says it's interesting, but I don't know, 4 hours to sit
Almost longer than that, I think, 4.5.
it is bad for me.
And, you know, Tim and I
Um,
really
this-
just, oh, go ahead.
This guy, though, I really didn't know what he was talking about, because he comes up and he talks about Christmas trees are hard to come by, but he talks about these plants. And I thought, what does that have to do with solar panels? And so in a break, I asked the guy, you know, what, and I guess they landscape around the solar panel farm because they don't,
So you don't see them.
you don't see them. I think a couple of things that really weren't said that speaks a lot. The words fossil fuel was never mentioned at all. Never. And that's really, we still rely on it for power to run our cars and everything. So that, I thought that was strange. Fossil fuel, people don't say this, is a finite resource. It took millions of years to make oil. And the last 120 years, we've really been pumping it out. So it is a finite resource, and we will run out, but no one knows when. It could be 200 years. It could be a lot less than that. It could be more than that. But and that wasn't really addressed. Another thing was not mentioned at all was climate change or global warming. And I thought that's why we're doing this green energy, is get away from fossil fuels. And so I thought I thought that was strange, that it wasn't mentioned at all. But, well, anyway, that's,
I'd like to add on a little bit more
okay,
from what
that's all.
you talked about.
That's all I.
You are right, they didn't mention any of that. And what's really interesting is this last couple of weeks, I watch YouTube a lot. And on YouTube, they have programs about volcanoes. And so what interests me was the first, they recorded things back when they had the first volcano and somebody started studying it and talked about it. And after all these years, you know, they understand volcanoes a little bit more clearly than they did back in maybe 1,000 years ago. I didn't catch the year of that, but the thing that I found interesting is that they talk about global warming. And when you have a volcano, we've had a lot of volcano eruptions. Sometimes they last up to 2 years. And that lava, when it blows, that lava goes down into the ocean. And that's why your ocean is warm. And they talk about how hot it is. And also, when I was watching it on TV, it also showed here's this ocean, and all of a sudden it's bubbling, and it's a volcano inside the ocean exploding. And if you think about it, they were talking also like Italy is getting ready to have a volcano there. After 200 years, it's going to erupt. And we've had one in Hawaii. We've had, well, several, one in Washington, out west. And then there's been several around the world. India is a big one for having volcanoes. And I thought every time you have a volcano, this lava goes down into the ocean. If they last 200 years, think of how hot that is. And also everything that shoots up into the atmosphere goes around the world also. And so sometimes they say that our air is not pure. Well, of course, it's not going to be. If you got a volcano going in India, it goes all the way around the world, and it shows how high up into the air it goes. And so there's a lot of things. I think it's sad that we don't teach history any longer in our schools, and that we're not studying some of the stuff, earthquakes, volcanoes, all these different storms that are coming in. And they talked about, you know, after you have a earthquake or you have a volcano, about how the waves of the ocean, what do they call it, that Masumi, or it's some kind of where the waves,
Tsunami.
how do you say that?
Tsunami.
Tsunami. Anyway, they say it can be as high as 40 feet when it comes into land. That's pretty large wave coming in. But anyway, there's a lot of stuff here, and I think too, we worry about oil running out. How do we know that part of the ocean and part of this, all of this might have something to do with our supply of oil. So I think that, I don't know. I think that when you invite people to come and to listen to all of these slides, I mean, 110 that I brought in, and there was more than that, slides, and it was read off, and you're right, Tim, there were several I couldn't understand either. The first girl and the last two, you couldn't really understand what they were talking about. They just kept reading and reading.
One thing that wasn't mentioned either was food production. They seem intent on putting these solar panels maybe on agriculture or something like this. In my lifetime, I said this before, in my lifetime, we tilled the same amount of land, but the food production has like quadrupled. Population has quadrupled. So I think it's a miracle, and I wouldn't mess with that. Someone said too that why don't they put these solar panels, if they want to try them out so bad, on state land?
Mhm.
Well, Michigan State, they put them over the parking lots.
Well, that's okay. That's a good idea. I'm not going to argue with that.
And they talked about that at that meeting yesterday too, how MSU is put them over all their paved parking areas, because that was another one of the counties that was there, like, why aren't they doing that? Like every Myers parking lot.
Myers and Walmart.
Yeah, these huge shopping centers that are already paved, that was that wasn't at this meeting, that was at that yesterday when we were there, Tim, that they were talking about that.
But what on, I missed that part.
Like down at MSU, they've covered all of their paved parking areas with solar panels. So the one, what was the House of Reps,
Where do they park their cars?
Yeah,
underneath them, they're way up off the ground, so you can park underneath them. It was Osterhoff that was, or, oh, what was his last name? Vanderwall. That was
Oster.
yeah. Yeah. Our own Chris was there talking. No, anyhow, the House of Reps Vanderwall had talked about, remember he mentioned it would take 220,000 acres of land covered with these things.
How you could do it in parking lots, you.
Yeah, so that equates out to if you took a 1 mile wide swipe from the Ohio line all the way to the Michigan to the Mackinac Bridge, that's 220, it's 339 miles or whatever. And if you take 339 times 640, which is a square mile of land, you go all the way to the bridge, 1 mile wide in this Michigan, just to get to what they're projected they're gonna need. So that's quite a bit of ground and, you know, might not seem like a lot unless you live in that 1 mile stripe that they're gonna go up through there. And obviously you couldn't do that because it'd go through major cities and all of those sorts of things. So it was just interesting that this was also a topic at this Northern Michigan Counties thing. You know, that I think we talked about solar longer than we talked about any other issue, single issue there was about solar and how the state now has mandated that they have the authority to come in and say, we want these here. And I mean, let's face it, Gratiot County has a main transmission line that goes across the southern end of the county and one just to the north of the county. So we are, you know, not only,
From our, wind turbines.
well, the power lines were there before, but that's why we were such a target to get the wind turbines is they had an easy access to get power out of here. So they will continue probably to target areas that have main accesses to these power lines. That's just why they are where they are. So did they talk at all about, you know, it shows that there's a reduction in price if you go to the, you know, the final conclusions of this thing, that it did decrease the values of these homes if they were sold after the announcement or after building of the solar farms. Did they talk about taking into effect, you know, the years they studied are right when the United States of America went through a housing like boom in pricing. So did they calculate into that this reduction in price at all? Because when there's a shortage of homes, people are paying more than, you know, their asking price.
see, they started at the beginning talking about it, and then at the end, they talked about it. At the beginning, they said, no, you don't lose value of your home.
Mhm.
But at the end, they were, and that was like, just like a community of homes.
Mhm.
But at the end, they showed this big field, I think that's in here even,
Mhm.
a picture of it where they got this farmland and they got a house there. And they gave 2 or 3 illustrations of it, that the house was like 100,000, 125,000, I forgot
Yeah.
the numbers. But when they sold it, it sold for like 150, but then a year later it sold again. But why would somebody sell it every year like that? That would have been a question. I'm talking about long-term thing. If you have a house and you have it for 10 years, is it gonna lose that value after
Mhm.
10 years? But I'm gonna tell you too, that lady that was in here and showed us the tape where
Yeah,
it made the
yep,
noise. Can you imagine the noise if you have 800 acres? There's 800 acres. I'm gonna go see it and I'm gonna video it. But I wanna see the part where she said that apparently there was a storm and it broke a lot of them.
There was a hailstorm down through there that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and they can't fix them. They're just gonna leave them. But then I've seen them over here on 46 in Breckenridge. Is it Breckenridge or further, where they've got some solar?
Yeah,
panels?
just Invenergy has them right out by the
Yeah.
road there, yeah.
So they have them there, but they're not so close. They're like, I mean, you can see, it looks like they can like move them and there's room in between. You could probably walk under them. I mean, I could, I'm sure. But I thought, well, that wouldn't be too bad. You go up there and just change one, but the
Mhm.
way she said, no, they're just like real close, one after another.
Hmm.
And I don't think they're able to, maybe they are. I'm gonna wait until they put them in over here in Pine River, where you can tilt them, move them, and that type of thing. Then you could get down through there. But my biggest concern is after they talked about it, is the chemicals that these are holding. And if you had, like, say you had 50 of them break, and those chemicals are going down into the ground and then maybe down into the water part of it. And so in 30 years, and the other part bothers me too. These are good for 30 years. Well, what are you gonna do after 30 years? Go back to oil, or do you replant or redo some new ones, or?
Well, I think it'll be similar to what we're seeing with the windmills. They're gonna, if the infrastructure's all there, they will probably look at revamping them, would be my guess. Because once you've put all the superstructure in the roadways, and that was another thing, the aggregate, Tim, do you remember how many, like hundreds of thousands of tons of aggregate one of these takes? Do you remember him talking about the aggregate? Yeah, the gravel and how we're short roads, and it's gonna affect townships and counties because of how much, rural counties, especially in the north, have gravel roads. And if they're using so much of that product to build these, heavily funded, it was an astronomical amount of gravel. When he was talking about it, it was like, oh, like just ridiculous.
Would
Like,
that be
wow.
for, farming if these panels are removed then?
I wouldn't want to have to plant my crops down the gravel road. I know that, you know what I mean? I think it will definitely affect the productivity. It would have to, because
Didn't we have farmers this year that had a problem with when they redo the roads every summer or every spring? And then they said that there was something wrong. because-
yeah, the quality of the gravel is
Yeah, the quality
definitely
of it,
down.
and it
Yeah.
was soft.
More sandy than it was. Used to be a clay and gravel base. Now it's more of a sand base.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know it's just me, but I think we've been on solar long enough.
Anyway, these were real interesting. Mine, both of them, sounds like they were very interesting. So, and if anybody that didn't get a copy of this would like a copy, let me know. Or Angie, I gave her, what's it called, the flash?
It's online under on the board book.
Very good.
Okay, well, that's the end of that.
Administrators report.
Well, I usually get to give the first report. You guys have really raised the bar.
Yeah, yeah.
It's been three,
Better make it good.
Yeah.
been 3 weeks since our last meeting. While we don't have a jam-packed agenda tonight, there has been a lot of work that's been getting done. Not just in administration, but throughout the courthouse. We had our public input session for the master plan. This is my first year going through the master plan. It has been a lot of fun. I really enjoy seeing all of the different cities and villages and townships, people getting together, talking about different ideas. Because I learned a lot about them, as I'm sure they learned a lot about me also. There's a lot of conversations there that I won't have a part of because it doesn't affect us here at the county level, but listening to the townships, just brainstorm on how to fix certain problems that may be unique to them. It's a lot of fun. And I want to thank everybody from the public who came to that meeting. And we got a lot of good information. I was told that it was one of the best online survey turnouts that our county has had since in recent history. So we had hundreds and hundreds of people that logged in and filled out the survey and said what they wanted to see in our county. And surprisingly, the thing that I took away from that is a lot of the things that they wanted to see, we do already provide. So one of the groups that I participated in, one of the breakaway groups I participated in, their focus was on communication. How can we better communicate to the people within our county, the services that we do provide? Because we have a lot of really good people that provide a lot of really good services. So more to come on that. So I'm hoping that we can make some good communication improvements. We had a central dispatch board meeting a week or two ago. Discussions were held. Specifically, the thing that I wanted to just share with this board was when we had a power outage three weeks ago.
Yep.
We had a generator issue out there. It didn't fire up the way that it was supposed to. So what we're doing is we're gathering all the informations to make a decision whether to fix the generator or to replace the generator. So an exact remedy of that issue is being worked on by a lot of people right now. One of the big things that is taking up our time is we are currently under audit for fiscal year 2023. So we're working on making sure that we know, our auditors know what our hard deadlines are for completing the processes, getting them the information so that we have an audit that is released on time this year. Hallie Barnes was on site today. I don't know if you saw her when you walked through the office, but we are currently working on that. I'm going to update you in closed session today for related to negotiations with road patrol and corrections. We worked very hard on that over the last 3 weeks. And I am going to ask Matt if he will stay online while we go into closed session so that if there is a decision to be made, that it can be made online also, because I suspect that there's probably a lot of people waiting to see if what decision this board makes later tonight. As you have been informed, our park director position is vacant. We have started interviewing some of the applicants for that, and we will complete the interviews for the applicants that we receive tomorrow morning. Sheila has been busy interviewing dispatchers. We're out at Central Dispatch, so we're looking to fill a position out there. Some emails that you've seen, we've had some employment internal shufflings. We had a custodian who has moved into an Office of Community Corrections position, and we have hired a new custodian. We were able to fill that position immediately. I do like to see internal shuffling. That tells me that people want to work here at the county. They aren't taking jobs elsewhere when they're taking jobs in the county. That makes me smile, and I know that makes Sheila smile also. Quick update at the airport. We are selling fuel at the airport.
Credit cards?
Yep. So we are selling fuel. We have had a few hiccups. We are working through the hiccups. Our airport manager has been physically there for everyone to make sure that it works properly. But like I said, we've had some hiccups and we're working through them, but we're finally moving fuel. I know that was goal number one for us at the airport. I know that was goal number one for the city of Alma too, when they owned it too. That's why they put in for this project. Next meeting, we will be hearing from our MERS rep. Our MERS rep will be able to talk to us about our pension fund and our OPEB fund. Our OPEB fund is just a fund that we put away for the liability for those former employees that we have promised benefits after retirement for. OPEB is a kind of a strange acronym. I try to explain that every time I say the word. We are making progress with our final turbine lawsuit. I updated you 2 meetings ago in closed session. We are doing exactly what we said we were going to do, getting towards those goals. I'm not going to speak much more to it in detail outside of closed session, but I want you to know that that has been keeping us busy. And lastly, what I wanted to tell you about and invite you to is hopefully you have seen the emails, but we are having a Super Bowl party tomorrow. It is a SOUPER bowl party. And Sheila, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it is tomorrow. And we are inviting all of our employees to partake in a lunch similar to, Deandra's sitting right here. It is tomorrow, right?
11:30.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
for that chili cook-off that we held.
Like, Yep, so if you're available between 11 and 1 tomorrow, swing in, say hi to the employees. That concludes the administrator update.
Tim, do you want to start off on commissioner reports?
Okay, I went to the Michigan Works and Jan drove. Got stuck in my driveway, but we made it. So,
That's why I drove a phone.
it was a really short meeting. But, I'm excited that, they talk about jobs, how to get employed and work habits and they actually, now they recruit, there's job recruiters come. And I was telling Chris here, I think it should be a mandatory high school class before you graduate. Maybe it could be pass fail or something about not only how to get a job, but how to be successful, work habits, job retention, your interests, very important for these young kids particularly. Develop an interest in something that could have a career, a work life. And I wasn't really, well, they talked about chief executive officer, but I shouldn't talk.
No, it was kind of like a meeting that I took Tim to was a regular meeting, plus I'm on the board of directors. And we are looking for to get a permanent CEO. And so, we didn't talk about it because there wasn't enough employees or enough, not employees, but enough of the people that sit on that board there to be able to vote to discuss it.
But I didn't get to sit at the table. I'm like an alternate, but Angie, they said you could call and I could.
She did, yeah.
As the next time I get to sit at the table.
Right.
That would be nice. Yesterday was kind of a long day, although the time really went by pretty good. I'm sure Steve will probably talk about this, getting rid of the property tax. And replace it with a sales tax. Boy, that would be revolutionary. But I guess the problem is, would we have enough money? So that was discussed. One thing that, I felt good about our county about is, believe it or not, there's some counties out there in financial trouble. Well, the guy that Steve,
We rode with it.
Jerry, we rode up with,
Yep.
Isabel County. They're building this humongous county jail and it's millions of dollars. And they're having trouble. So I think it's really good, Chris, that we're not in financial trouble. Are we?
No.
Very good. That's good. Talked about dams and electricity. Well, I'll let you explain it.
All right.
But well, it was fun. There's a lot of counties involved. There are a lot of people, a lot of different people.
34 different counties belong to that.
34 different counties. I think what makes us really strong too is we all come from different backgrounds, different interests, different knowledge sets and so, and that really makes us stronger, really, as a group, but. So that's about all, right?
And
Okay, well, I have a lot to say today. I'll hurry. First of all, we had a meeting, as, Tim said, that was on the 12th. I'm sorry, on the 12th, I went to Midland for a meeting. That was the executive board meeting I'm on. And I went by myself to that one. Then the second one was the Saginaw that Tim and I both went to. And he explained that one. And then we had another one the same week on the 18th, and that was the one that we went to the University of Saginaw. And,
Saginaw State.
yeah, Saginaw State. I had never been there, and I was really impressed. What a nice college it was.
Saginaw Valley State.
Yeah, Saginaw Valley, yeah. And very foggy that day, and you could hardly see anything. So we took our time and was there. One of the things I need to bring up to you is that I stopped in to see Jeff, the administrator of Breckenridge. And I think it was a year ago that he asked me about losing our park director, and I said yes. And he said that a year ago, I think it was a year or 2 years, year and a half ago, he applied for some of the money to put into Breckenridge. They have a water park there. And he was telling me too, it's probably the third. We have two parks that are very well used, and the third one would be that water park. People come from all over to go to their water park. And so he said that last year they weren't quite ready. So they gave their money back to the parks and said, we're going to give it back. And then, because when we apply for it the next time, we would like to have all of it so we can finish this project. And it's a pretty big project. And I didn't get into all the details on that. So he asked me, where is that going to go? He said that he sent that in, and that Pete replied back and said, I received your application. So do I need to go to that meeting and talk to them about it?
right next to you would be the gentleman to talk to.
Okay,
Yeah.
there you go.
This month, we will be discussing, there was $100,000 that was set aside for townships and villages within the county
Right.
to apply for grants. They received just under 300,000 in requests. So this month, the decisions will be made as to who's getting what and how much.
Okay, well, one of the things that Jeff had mentioned to me was, he said that he was granted some of the money, and he said, but he gave it back. He goes, I'm gonna give this back to you
Mhm.
because we need more to be able to finish it, and they're putting money with it,
Mhm.
so. And he gave me the paperwork on it, and I gotta tell you, I forgot to bring it, so I apologize for that. But anyway, he was telling me about that. If they can get this $100,000, they will be able to go in and they'll finish it all up. And like he had told me, he said that they need all of it in order to, and what they're gonna put with it to be able to finish this, and they won't ask. He said, we should not be, he said, afterwards, we probably will never ask for another dime from the parks. But he said, right now, we would like to finish this, and we need the whole $100,000. So if you'd like, I would even get a hold of Jeff and tell him that maybe he would come to the meeting, the next meeting that you have.
For the
And I
first
would-
meeting, yep.
Yeah, and I would like to be there too.
Yeah.
When is that meeting?
The third, hang on, let me add one of the things I need to talk about in my,
It's usually the day after the second county meeting.
it is
Third Wednesday?
21st, yep, the day after our second meeting.
And where's
right?
it at?
It is at the Alma Library. If you go in the hallway,
Oh.
walk to the north, and then keep going to
Yep,
the
I've
left,
been-
around and around, and there's a small meeting room. That's.
Okay, you said Elma, I've been there before. I
Yep,
was at-
yep.
A long time ago. Anyway, like he had said that there's people that come from all over to use his water park, and it's really unique. I've been there myself. And, but they're gonna be doing, I'm not sure exactly all the plans, but I asked him if he can come and
Mhm.
kind of talk about it. And I told him that I would definitely come to the commissioners about it. His concern was that he had already talked to Pete a year ago, and he said, I was really good about just giving that money back, even though it was awarded to us. He said it was not gonna be enough, and so he just gave it back and said, we'll finish working on our plans and the money part of it and all this. And he said that he assumed that when he heard that Pete had left, he thought, oh, now they're in trouble over this. And, so he would just like to have all of it, finish his project, he's out of the picture. That's basically what it's about. So anyway, I, had a talk with him and,
Just real quick, Jen, the way the program works is the amount that the parks grants out is a budgetary item. So that would be set by this board
okay,
at budget time. So what would need to happen is they would need to, like, you would need to go to the advisory group. If the advisory group thinks that this can happen because he lapsed money in the previous year, the advisory group would then make a recommendation to this
To the board, yes.
to say, I know you only approved $100,000, but 40,000 of it lapsed last year. Would you consider granting 140,000 this year or something like that?
So we can, yeah.
help somebody.
And I have no idea what those fund numbers are from last year.
I'd have to double check that.
I have no idea.
But if what you're saying has happened, that would be the proper route to looking.
Go ahead to try and get that kind of money.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm glad and I just happened to be there and talking with them and he brought it up, but has anybody here other than myself been to the water park over there? If you had a chance, go over there. It's very nice. Very unique. And they have several parks in Breckenridge. So you got Wheeler Township, again, a lot of them, like Emerson, Lafayette, I'm sure all of them have children and they come in and they probably use this and it's really nice for that part of the county. Another reason I had stopped over there was because I've talked to Brent, who is with Elma Transportation. And I left a copy off, actually, I forgot it there, but I left it off at Wheeler Township. And it is because they did a survey and now the transportation goes from, it's Pine River, Ithaca, Elma, St. Louis, all of that now has transportation where you can call it and get a ride. You can go all the way to Mount Pleasant. You go to Mount Pleasant, and catch another bus and go, like say you want to go to the doctor's office, you leave there, catch another bus and go over to maybe Walmart's, spend a few hours there. You can call them and then they'll come back and pick you up and take you back home. And there's a lot of people. Now, what they did, the survey showed that there was a lot of people out in the country, elderly people that would like to use this. And I know in St. Louis they're using that because I see them there all the time. So anyway, I left the paperwork there and they are interested. When I talked to Jerry from Wheeler Township, and also Brett said he would go out and talk to him, but they'd like to do a millage and see if they can do all of 46, which would be nice, would be all the way from Wheeler Township all the way down to past Pine River, and then maybe eventually, and you've got Ithaca, St. Louis, and Alma. And so that's a big chunk. And then if we can venture out like maybe Ashley and pull in some more of the townships, and it'd be nice if anybody in Gratiot County needed to go to Mount Pleasant. And a lot of people go there for a lot of different reasons. They can call them, tell them when they need it, and they're there at the door to pick them up. And not only if you're on a wheelchair, they have vehicles that come. They have a guy that gets out and helps you get on this bus with the wheelchair, and they bring you right back to your home and make sure that you're in the house. So these are great things that are happening in our county that we probably don't hear a lot about. So anyway, that was another thing that I talked to him. Another thing that I have on here, let me see here. GIS. Oh, I attended the meeting for GIS. I'm always interested in that too. But yeah, I have a lot of time these days, so I'm kind of hitting a lot of the meetings just to kind of educate myself on some of the great things that are going on in Gratiot County. So that's pretty much. Do you guys have any questions for me? I will call Breckenridge tomorrow and tell them about the meeting, okay?
Good.
Thanks. And thank you, Chris.
All right, a few different things. All of the, before I forgot about this, we just received an email today. I don't know if the commissioners have seen it, but it came from the Gratiot Conservation District. They were awarded a 2024 Eagle scrap tire cleanup grant. So the award this year was enough for them to fill 2 semi-trailers for a countywide cleanup and one for the cleanup in Seville Township
Wow.
each year. So that's significantly more than I think last year it was only one. So it's actually double what they can take in. And there's actually a website you can schedule a time to take in if you have any scrap tires to take in. So if you go out to any of your constituents, it's on the Gratiot Conservation District, and it went out to all of us. Meetings that I went to, Mid-Michigan Health, I attended with George. Started the meeting out, they just elected chair, vice chair, all that for the year. Basically stayed with the exact same officers they had for 2023. Dr. Morse talked about a disease called prion, Prion disease. It's a disease of transmissible, 2 words, spongiform encephalitis. It's not encephalitis, it's some other thing. Anyhow, are a family of I'll give it to you afterwards.
Okay.
Are a family of rare progressive neurodegenerative disorders that affect both humans and animals. And it's something that they have, it's kind of on the horizon. There's some cases of it, and she wanted to make us aware of it. Not that it's here or anything, but just make us aware of that. So that was a very interesting discussion. They also discussed PFASs at the Grand Ledge Air National Guard Base. That is actually in southern Clinton County, the actual air base is. So they're dealing with some PFAS issues there. And so that's kind of a big deal for the health department right now. Employee engagement committee that I sit on. Yes, tomorrow is the Super Bowl. So if you can make it 11 to 1, I think everybody'd love to see us there. It's $5, basically $5 lunch is what it is. There was an entry fee for the employees to put soup in it, but anybody that wants to enjoy tasting the different soups, similar to the chili cook-off, it's $5 and basically all you can eat. You're gonna not leave there hungry, I don't think. They also did a coffee and donuts last Wednesday on January 31st. Here in the courthouse, actually down at the break room area, correct? I wasn't able to make it that. I had another commitment that I had to be at, so I wasn't there. And then in February, they're having a blood drive at the Gratiot Commission on Aging, Monday, February 12th, from 11 to 3:45. This ended up being postponed due to weather issues. So this is the rescheduled date, but anybody who wants to come and donate blood and set up, if any of the commissioners want to come and help with setup, it's 9 to 11, right? They want us there from 9 to 11 to do setup. So if you want to come get yourself all worked up to give blood quicker, the more the help, the merrier, right? Northern Michigan counties, yesterday I drove, Tim and I went, we picked up a commissioner from Isabella County, named Jerry Jelasinski from Isabella County. Some of the things that went over it was well attended. There's 34 counties, member counties in the Northern Michigan Counties Association. I think there was 21 counties represented there, if I counted them right. There was some, Tim and I were there. There was 2 of us. There was 2 from Gladman, 2 from a few of the different counties, but I think there was 20 or 21 counties that were represented there. So
It's because they had the meal.
yeah, exactly. Anyhow, you drive clear up to Roscommon Municipal Building and it's kind of alarming. There's very little snow in Roscommon. I mean, snow piles, but there was more snow in like Harrison and northern Clare County than anywhere else on the way up there. It was really kind of sad. There was ice still on the lake. But anyhow, at some point in time, Chris, I'm going to tell you this because you will be getting an email along with Tim. There will be a $75 fee that we receive for being a member of MAC. And they didn't do it. It's been kind of hodgepodge since the pandemic. So they're going to start reinstating that per year. Their funds are really dwindled because of all the expenses they've had and not getting any dues. Citizens for Local Choice was something they really recommended that we take out to our townships and to our people. They have a website. They're gonna need 550,000 signatures. That is the group that wants to get the ballot initiative on for local communities to have to get the power back to control what's going on in our communities instead of the state of Michigan. They seem pretty optimistic that because there's a lot of people in the Upper Peninsula that are not happy about this. And then all of those northern counties, which are kind of prime targets for that, we all know they're not gonna build solar farm in Grand Rapids, Detroit, Flint. Those are not the areas they're gonna do it. They're gonna do it in the more rural areas because it's wide open space and that's where they like to target. So they really encouraged us to have people go to the Citizens for Local Choice website and get involved because it's gonna take a lot of work in order to fend this thing off, because otherwise you gotta remember, you gotta overcome these huge sections of voters that it's really not gonna affect them. So what difference does it make to them? They are also looking for each county to have a captain in their area. So if you know of anybody that would be really good at that, to encourage that person from our county to become active in that, but it's gonna take time and it's gonna be kind of a labor intensive thing, so they're gonna have to, it's gonna have to be somebody who has that time to devote to. Axe the tax, Tim brought up, that's the thing where they want to get rid of property tax and go to a state sales tax. They were like, this will bankrupt most of the especially your rural counties. This will totally bankrupt. I mean, that was very evident. They were talking about bankrupting many of these counties. Maybe some of the most affluent counties will survive, but it'll be devastating. And they said, if you want to know how devastating it is, go to your equalization department and have them have an honest discussion with them and have them let you know how much money you're talking about that comes into the county from property
So
taxes.
what happens to the county? You mean it's swallowed up by another county? Is that what would happen?
They didn't even go into any of that kind of stuff. It's just, we receive 80% of our funding.
Well, think about it this way. About a third of our funding comes from wind turbines, and wind turbines are not going to be buying goods and services.
No, yeah. So
Because
it's,
they don't,
yeah,
they're not alive.
they're not alive. They're not gonna be going out and buying new cars and things like that. So this would have a real effect on our county, big time. They also, John Hearn, is retiring. They announced that at the meeting. He has headed this up for as long as anybody can remember this Northern Michigan counties thing. He works for MSU Extension, lives up near Traverse City. He is retiring. He and his wife have 24 grandkids, and it sounds like he's pretty excited to spend some time with them. He will probably stay on due to the extension is having trouble getting people to come work for them as well. So he fully expects that he will be retained to kind of stay on as a consultant basis to help this committee until someone is up to speed of what's going on. We had speaker Deanna Bosworth. She's the Director of Governmental Affairs for MAC. She came in, talked about the 2024 state priorities, creating a fair revenue sharing system for counties, enacting reforms to ensure proper funding of our local courts, which is something that's important to our compensating local governments for funds diverted from veterans' property tax exemption, which is another thing that ensuring reasonable health care costs, sharing the county jail inmates, which we talked quite one of the counties. Do you remember which one? It was Ogama County, Tim, that built the new jail in 2013, and they're losing, like they built the jail for 140, or no, they built it for 113, and they're now averaging post-COVID 40 people. So they're,
Well, you pointed out
yeah,
that people don't go to jail.
Yeah, it's like they're losing hundreds of thousands of dollars in this, because of this jail size and the way it's designed. It's hard to shut down parts of it. It's really a problem for them. And then increase road funding to address Michigan's infrastructure. They talked about this vote that you've probably heard about on the news of whether or not they're gathering information right now about whether people will favor continuing with gas tax to pay for our roads or go for miles traveled for our roads. They seem, the people in the legislators that were there seemed, and the government seemed like they were thinking that the trend is leaning towards miles tax. You'll be taxed by how many miles you actually use the road, because then it won't matter if you're using hydrogen, because there's hydrogen buses and stuff out there and vehicles, electric or gas or diesel. It will go on miles traveled. So
So how would they, I guess I missed that part. So how would they know how many miles you are traveling?
they didn't talk about it, but I'm assuming you'll have to, like in other states, you'll have to take your vehicles in
Uh-huh.
for like an inspection, or someone will have to come to like the county courthouse or somewhere in the county, and they'll have somebody from the state there that looks in and then
Do
calculates.
they do this in any other state?
There's a lot of different ways other states fund their roads.
Yeah.
So, and then last night after the Northern Michigan's meeting, I went to the Parrington Village meeting. And they are in the process of changing out all of their water meters to a new style water meter. They're just getting started on it, but it works similar to like the new style, electric meters, where it uses a cellular technology to give them the reading per month on how much water people are using. So, that is just in its infancy. I think 4 or 5 of them is all they have installed, and they're gonna get going on that. And they just put in for a large grant, just under $200,000, to be checking for lead pipes. It's something that with all the things that have happened in Flint and Benton Harbor and what have you, all these towns are gonna be having to go in and check what comes into the home, every home on their system. They have to record what is coming into the home, which luckily for them, this is coming about while they're putting these new water meters on, so they're gonna have to get that in. However, you have to excavate out at the curb on both sides of the curb line, or not the curb line, but the water box, to see what is coming on both sides of it. So they have to actually have like a hydro excavator where they spray water down to get down to it so it doesn't damage any of these valves. And it's a fairly expensive thing, like $1,000 per one they do in the village, to check these, to make sure that there's no lead. They don't believe by the time the system was installed in Parrington, they don't believe they have any, but then they know certain sections were done after 1995. And they know that there's other sections that they don't know for sure. So if they do, it is the village's responsibility to replace that from the curb or from the main water line to the home. So they talked about that for a fair amount of time last night. And that concludes my thing. Sorry, I got long-winded.
Well, I went to the Alma Commission and they were also talking about lead pipes. They're replacing them and they're replacing some streets. And I got a letter from the Region 7 area Agency on Aging. And our current delegate's term expires March the 31st. And Angie says we're on top.
Yeah.
So, that's it.
I'm just laughing because,
He's short and sweet and I'm long and bitter.
no, I was thinking about that we spent an hour telling what all the things that we did. I think this has been a great meeting. with
And
a lot
Dave's
of
done in 30
information.
seconds.
Hey, I have to ask you a question though. What time's that meeting at the library?
5:30,
5:30?
5:30 in the evening.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, consideration of new business. Deandra?
Wait for Matt to put up my presentation. But for those of you who don't know me, my name is Deandra Messer. I am the Deputy Permits Officer for Gratiot County, and I'm out of the Community Development Department. So Tony and Bill both definitely wanted to be here today. Unfortunately, they were unable to make it. Bill, as some of you know, is on the City Council for St. Louis, so he had that commitment today, and Tony is under the weather. So you get me today. So I know that you guys have already had a chance to look at the annual report. Honestly, I believe this is the third or fourth one that we provided to the Board of Commissioners. And to be quite frank, not much has changed in regards to the actual format of our report. It's more so the data that I continuously add to it every year that changes. Because I think that the current layout is fairly straightforward. It's self-explanatory and it's a little bit easier to read. So today, I'm basically just going to be breaking down the information that I provided to you. And then if you have any questions, feel free to let me know. So just a little bit about our department. So disclaimer, Tony is the department head for community development as well as buildings and grounds. So I will be discussing buildings and grounds a little bit today, but don't confuse the fact that buildings and grounds is within community development. They are two separate. But what community development actually oversees is building permits, zoning permits, soil erosion permits, and then blight enforcement. In building permits, we actually issue permits for the entirety of Gratiot County, excluding the city of Alma and excluding the city of St. Louis. So they actually handle their permits in-house. For zoning, we only zone 6 of the townships. So the other 10 townships, the 3 cities, and the 3 villages all have their own zoning enforcement agency. So we zone Elba, Hamilton, Lafayette, Newark, North Star, and Sumner. For soil erosion, again, we issue soil erosion for the entirety of Gratiot County, excluding the city of St. Louis. Again, they handle that in-house. And for blight, since the start of the blight enforcement services that we offer, we started out with 4 townships that we offered the service to, and then it continuously grew over the past 2 years. So currently, we offer the services to Elba Township, Bolton, North Star, Wheeler, New Haven, North Shade, Sumner, Lafayette, and then the Village of Harrington and the Village of Ashley. And then buildings and grounds, I mean, it's fairly self-explanatory in the title, but they handle the maintenance and manage the Gratiot County owned buildings and then all the property that we own. All right, so if we're looking at our 2 departments, the actual personnel, we've had a little bit of change. I know that Chris just mentioned to you, so I'll break it down for you. So for community development, that's just Tony is our department head. He acts as the building official. He is also certified as a soil erosion officer. So if there's ever a chance where Bill or I cannot complete an inspection or review an application, but Tony is also able to do that. Bill is currently the soil erosion officer / zoning administrator / blight code enforcement officer. So he's a man with many hats. And then I am the deputy permits officer. And my role kind of consists of all the administrative duties. And then I'm also certified as a soil erosion officer. I help Bill with his blight enforcement. And then just last year, I got my Master Citizen Planner Certificate and Zoning Administrator Certificate. So I don't necessarily do his job because it's a lot, but if I need to review an application or assist someone with a zoning permit, I'm able to do so. Looking at buildings and grounds, Tony again is the department head, followed by Ryan Sullivan, who is our project supervisor. And then we have Steve Stallman and Kevin Lombard under maintenance. Paul Davenport, I know that he retired, but he was here in 2023, so that's why we're giving him a little recognition. He was one of the custodial attendants. Bill Jerome was also a custodial attendant, but as of yesterday, he now works in OCC. And then our new custodial attendant that we hired at the end of last year is Robert or Bob Bashaw. And I don't know I believe it is Lori, but I can't remember her last name. She is our latest and greatest custodial attendant. And if you guys are ever walking around, you will probably see her because she is very in-depth. She's also very polite, very courteous. And she makes sure that she gets deep into those corners. So I know she's only been here for a couple of days, but even now she's doing a great job. So with all the certificates that we have in the community development department, that includes building official license, building inspector license, stormwater operator licenses. With all of those comes continued education. So I'm not going to go through each webinar or class that we had to take in 2023, but this just gives you kind of an idea of what we do throughout the year, just to maintain our knowledge, because things are always changing, but B, just our status in these certifications. Some of the more interesting ones for me are the zoning ones that I now have to take, because when I think of zoning, initially I thought it was just like setbacks and can I have a chicken coop or not? And some of these classes actually go into depth in things like local regulation and mining, which is a hot topic at the end of last year, as well as like zoning conflict, public meetings. So it really covers broad topics that pertain to what we have to handle. And then Bill and Tony, I'm sure they have a wealth of knowledge in regards to building code. But as we all know, everything is always changing. So these classes help them keep on top of what's new in their industry. All right, so now we're going to get a little bit more in depth into the actual data from our department. So what I'm going to cover is the number of permits that we've issued, how many inspections we've actually completed, as well as the revenue that specifically comes from permits. And then if you do have any questions, you're welcome to stop me. There will also be a time towards the end where if you have any questions, you'll have an opportunity. All right, so here are 4 graphs for you. So the left side of the screen is just our permit activity. And I just offered the exact same data in 2 different formats because I prefer a line graph, but I know that some people like to see that bar graph up there. So basically what that left set of graphs is showing you is the permit activity from 2020 to 2023. And when I say permit activity, I am talking about how many permits were applied for and then how many building permits were actually issued. So those 2 numbers stay fairly standard, but someone may apply for a building permit in December and it may not get issued until January. So that's just why there's a comparison there. And you'll see that for the most part, it's been fairly level throughout the past 4 years. There hasn't been a significant increase in permits and there hasn't been a significant decrease in permits. I can't speak as to the previous years, but as far as Bill and Tony like to say is they have seen an increase, not just because of the wind turbines or the solar panels, but also just because there is a bit of housing development boom just in our area where people were developing units. On the right side of the screen, we'll actually look at the inspection activity. So these are the inspections that Bill and Tony will do, not just in Gratiot County, but we actually also contract inspection work for the city of Alma. So I mentioned earlier that the city of Alma issues their own building permits, but we actually contract in to do the inspections for them. Otherwise, it would be kind of pricey to have their own in-house inspection for say 30 permits that they get throughout the year or 50 permits that they get throughout the year. So for 2021 and 2023, you'll see that we had a higher number of inspections. And I can say this is a pretty good correlation with when those wind turbines came in. When those projects came in, Tony had to go out and inspect all the footings. He had to inspect all the rebar, and those contributed greatly to his workload in those 2 years. Not to say that he's not busy in 2020 or 2022, but he definitely had a little bit more on his plate when he was inspecting those wind turbines. What's nice about those larger projects is they all do have 3 other inspectors who go out, including Tony. So nothing's ever missed. There's always like 3 sets of eyes on it. which is really nice. And we also get access to their reports. So if anyone ever asks us, is this actually safe? Is it actually sturdy? We can be like, yes, we've had 4 people who reviewed this. And then I will also note that a little bit later, I'll talk about the inspections for soil erosion. But building permits are only good for 6 months from the date of the last activity. So there's definitely a shorter time period when it comes to building permits. So you may have a permit that was issued in 1 year and it will be inspected and finalized out in that exact same year. But when it comes to soil erosion, those are year-long and they're also weather-based. So if you build a house, we can't final out your house until you have grass or vegetation, because that's what's going to prevent soil erosion. But if you build a house, you finish it in like the fall, you're not going to lay down seed. So all it's just going to go away. You have to wait until the spring. So building permits are open for 6 months. Soil erosion permits are open for a year, just to make sure that we're constantly reviewing them. So this is just the revenue that's related to building permits. So I know that you guys, what was it, a couple months ago or a month ago, reviewed our fee schedule. So per MCL 230 of 1972, all of the fees that are generated by our department actually can only be used for the operation of our department. And that's just so that we're only bringing in the money that's necessary to run our department, whether it's to pay for gas for inspections, to pay for the paper it takes to print a permit. That's how it's set up, which I know is a little bit different than other departments. So I just wanted to give you an insight into basically the increases that we saw. I know this is not regular, just because we're not always going to have wind turbines coming in. We're not always going to have solar farms coming in, but they did have an impact that's quite noticeable on the revenue that was generated. So obviously in 2020 and 2022 were our largest activities, and that was invoiced as well as paid. And then 2021 and 2023, we can say is a more normal standpoint for like the coming years. It's something that's, I guess, a little bit more recognizable in terms of we're not going to see $500,000 or $250,000. Yeah.
Are there more permits for the wind turbines than there are for just because the sheer number of them than there is for a solar farm?
Yeah, so to get into that a little bit, so when we issue a permit, it is based on the parcel. So the wind turbines, they're obviously on one individual parcel, and then they also obviously have like all their access roads. So when we issue a permit, it's based on parcel. And with the wind turbines, I believe there's over 230 parcels that were involved in just the latest project. But if you look at solar, yes, they are using a lot of acreage, but typically they will use parcels that have more acreage as opposed to these 1 or 2 acre parcels that they're using for a wind turbine. So just as an example, the latest solar project, it was only 9 parcels that were involved, but they had over 300 acres within those 9 parcels. So I would say, yes, we issue more permits for wind turbine projects and less for the solar, but that's because it's parcel based. It's not necessarily acreage based. Does that make sense?
How many wind turbines did you put in this last year?
The latest project was 72. I could not tell you the exact locations of them. We have a map for that. But yes, I issued 72 building permits. And then soil erosion is parcel based. So there's 234 parcels where there is soil disturbed. So we had to issue 234 soil erosion permits. There's a lot of paper, but I mean, it's necessary. Always cross your T's and dot your I's. But yeah, any questions on the revenue for building permits?
You did a nice job putting this together.
Thank you. All right, so another aspect to building permits that necessarily, it's not directly related to the actual building code, but it is something that we issue is addresses. So Gratiot County has an addressing ordinance that Tony has to review. And we receive applications and issue addresses for new homes, for parcels where people are putting pole barns. Another thing I wanted to note is that there was a huge increase in 2020 And that is because we also issue addresses for wind turbines. So those access roads, or whether it's a wind turbine or a solar farm, we'll issue an address to them. And I believe that was more so of a safety concern. Because if there's ever an accident out there, you want to have an address where 911 or the ambulance can go out to. So yeah, in 2020 and 2023 is when we issued the addresses for those projects. So that was why there is such a huge influx. But otherwise, the average of the 50s, issuing 50 addresses a year is pretty standard. And it's 85% of the time for new homes that are being put in, or for a pole barn that someone just wants to have an address out to.
I apologize. I'm just gonna back you up real quick. I have a couple questions on your permit office program. Does the state of Michigan provide the same services to residents that the permits department does? Will they issue permits also or not?
They will to an extent. So if there is a county that does not adopt Act 230 of 1972, then the state technically has to provide a building official for that county. And that building official will do the same duties that Tony does, but the funds would go to the state of Michigan. So they may have an office within the county, but that doesn't necessarily mean they work for that county.
What are the benefits for the residents of the county? For the county providing that department and service? I can think of two big ones off the top of my head, so I'm kind of. Put me on the spot.
Time and money, immediately. So in terms of time, if you need to call a state inspector out there, whether it's for like, say, electrical, mechanical, or plumbing, which we don't do in-house. On a good year, they're 2 weeks out. On a bad year, i.e. COVID, they were up to 2 months out before you could get an inspection. And when you're building a house, you don't really want to wait for an inspector who's not going to be there for another 6 weeks or 3 weeks before you can do the next step of your project. There's just a delay. In terms of cost, so the state has like a set fee schedule, the same that we do. But their fee is significantly higher than ours because their operating cost is going to be higher when they have to pay for the office, the lodging, the miles for these inspectors to travel across the state. So I would say time and money are the.
That's why it's very important that we make sure your division or your department is solvent and stays solvent.
Do you have a question?
Actually, I was gonna ask about, you answered it with, we do rely on the state for electric, mechanical, and plumbing, correct?
Yes, and
They are the Achilles heel when you're building something.
yeah, and it would be too costly for us to justify having one in-house. But at least on our end, but I know that for residents, they say that it's way more expensive to get a state inspector like electrical or mechanical or plumbing. But we told them that if we were to have them in-house, they wouldn't have the amount of work it would take to pay them. Like they just wouldn't even consider us because they wouldn't make
Yeah.
enough money.
You'd have to share with like 2 or 3 counties or something, which would defeat the purpose. It wouldn't be a lot faster than the state.
Because I mean,
Places that do it, that's their complaint, is that it's no faster than the state of Michigan, so.
yeah, it's an ideal situation, but it's not the reality of the situation.
But you talk about the delay and how long it takes. When they had to have electrical inspectors at every one of those wind turbines. Miraculously, they didn't have to wait
That's funny how it
long
works.
periods of time, so. Building your house or your pole barn, you have to wait. If the state wants a wind farm, they'll be there. I think they assigned certain people to them, so
Yeah.
it was just kind of ironic that they didn't have to wait.
But yeah, and it's nice because, I mean, even though Tony contracts out to do inspections for the city of Alma, I mean, how far away is the city of Alma? 12 minutes. So if you need to do an inspection there, we typically ask for 24 to 48 hours notice. And that's what I tell people just to cover our end. But in reality, if you call in the morning and Tony has availability, he can go out and do an inspection for you that day, that afternoon. Yeah. All right, so now we're going to look into zoning, and this is going to give you a little bit in the insight to the permits In the revenue, we do not do inspections per se for zoning. Because those typically tie in with the building inspections. But if you have any questions in regards to like the planning commission or the zoning board of appeals, you can also question that here. So first, look at the permit activity. Again, I have the two graphs for you. On the left is just the permit activity, same exact data, just two different formats. On the right, we'll look at the revenue activity. Again, same exact data, it's just two different formats, just to give you a better visual on the information. So pretty standard for zoning. So as I mentioned before, we only zone 6 townships, so there is a little bit less permits that are issued for zoning. Standard would be that 40-ish range. You will see that in 2022, we had a bit of an influx, and that is attributed to the wind turbines that came through, that were located within our townships, as well as the solar farm that came through. There is going to be a slight influx in regards to if they're located within our township. But again, with solar, we issue less permits because they're on less parcels, even though those parcels could be 300 acres. In regards to the revenue, so I'm not sure the last time that the permit fee for zoning was changed outside of a few weeks ago. It's been fairly standard just because it doesn't take a whole lot for zoning inspections, nor does it take a whole lot for the review. So the review process of a zoning permit includes, does this meet the standards of the ordinance, and do the setbacks meet the regulations? And once you've done the job for 10 years, you pretty much know the setbacks, and you pretty much know what's allowed and how many chickens you can have in your backyard, depending on where you're located. So the fee increase there again in 2022 was due to the large, I believe it was Heartland Farms from Invenergy was the name of that project, was due to that. And I'm sure if you looked prior to 2020 at that data from the 3 previous wind farms, you would also see an increase in the permitting activity. But when it comes to just a house or a pole barn or any of these projects that require zoning, in just our 6 townships, we don't necessarily need as many permits.
Let's be honest too, we've had a contractual zoning officer who has definitely given us a hometown discount for the last decade.
So as I mentioned before I started on the slide, so part of zoning is the planning commission and the zoning board of appeals. So Bill does act as obviously the zoning administrator, so he does answer to the planning commission and offer reports to them whenever applications come through. But our department in general, outside of his reports and then my like setting up the meetings and being the recording secretary, we don't actually necessarily like make any decisions in regards to planning commission or the zoning board of appeals. But the planning commission will hear anything in regards to PA 116s, which while they are through the state of Michigan, we are reviewing agents. We also hear anything in regards to if they need a special land use. So all of those wind turbines needed a special land use, the solar farms needed special land uses. So the planning commission will hear those. Zoning board of appeals, it's kind of in the name, but what they hear is appeals in regards to decisions that are made by our zoning administrator. And they also hear variances in regards to our ordinance. And a variance is basically a project that wants to come in, they don't necessarily meet the zoning ordinance requirements, so then they have to request a variance. All right, so now we're going to look at soil erosion and sedimentation control. And I will be completely honest, coming out of college 4 years ago into the county, I never would have thought that I'd be going out to look at some dirt. And I also did not understand how important the dirt was. But there's so much that goes into soil erosion and sedimentation control that Bill's wealth of knowledge has been great. So we're going to get into, again, the permit data with this. But if you have any questions for me, please let me know. So soil erosion and sedimentation control. So a permit for soil erosion is actually only issued if certain standards are met. So if there's going to be over an acre of soil that is disturbed, then we will issue a permit. If there is soil that's going to be disturbed within 500 feet of a body of water that is over an acre in size, then we will issue a permit. So the primary location where we have a lot of our permits open at currently is down by Rainbow Lake. And that's just when it's someone put in a seawall, all those nice new homes that were being built, we had to issue permits for those. So looking at the permit activity, that 79, 89, 90 range is fairly standard from what I've seen. That's the number of permits that were issued over the past few years. And Bill says that that trend is fairly standard in terms of the construction trend of new homes / seawalls that are being put in / commercial structures that are going in. So that large 2022 jump to 334 was 100% because of the Heartland Wind Farm. And that is because, again, we had to issue a permit for each parcel that was involved in the project. And it was 234 parcels. So I know that 336 looks like a high number, but please note that 234 of those were specifically for that large project. Tying into the inspection activity, I mentioned this earlier. Bill, myself, and Tony are all certified and qualified to perform SCSC inspections. Typically, it's Bill. Once in a while, I'll go out myself, particularly in the summer. And that's just because if you're not aware, Bill is a Tuesday through Thursday contractor position. So if someone suddenly needs an inspection on Monday or Friday, I can take the time to go out and perform that inspection for them. But there was a time in 2022 where Bill also needed to help Tony with a lot of his inspections. If you recall, that was one of Tony's higher times in inspections. And so Bill can fill in because he is also a building official. So then I got pulled out into the field and had to get a little dirty looking at some dirt. It's honestly not too bad. I will say that Bill has developed a great relationship with a lot of the contractors. Because it used to be the way, hearsay, it used to be the way that you didn't want to pull a soil erosion permit. Why should I pull a permit when I'm just digging a hole for a pond in my backyard? Or what if I'm just doing this, why do I need this permit? And technically it is a state regulation. We follow Part 91, and that's why we issue the SCSC permits. And a lot of people just either weren't knowledgeable that these even existed or were required, or they just didn't want to deal with the hassle with it because they're on a timeline. So Bill has developed a great relationship with a lot of local contractors. So they know immediately if they're going to be doing a certain type of project in this location, oh, there's like a lake 500 feet away, I have to pull a permit. Or, oh, it's over this size of soil disturbance, it's over an acre, then I'll have to pull a permit. So he's done a great job in just educating them in general in what's actually required. So this is just the revenue activity in regards to the soil erosion permits. And it's based on invoiced and paid is how I broke it down. And you'll see at the beginning there's a weird split off. And if you looked at the numbers in the report, which if you didn't, I don't blame you, you'll see that in 2020, we only invoiced 25,000 for permits, but what was actually paid was 58,000. And I believe that was because that was the tail end of the previous wind farm. I don't know what the name of it was, but that was like right before I came in. So when they paid for those permits, those soil erosion permits, we received those payments after the year had started. But Bill had invoiced them like in December, November, but then they just didn't pay us until the following year. So there's a weird split there. And then in 2023, again, that huge influx, and that is because we had to issue those 234 permits for the wind turbines. And it wasn't, I mean, I say there's only 72 wind turbines, but the soil erosion permits were also for access roads. They're also for where they needed to cut in the corners to make sure that the large trucks could get through. It's for all the crane walks. So the actual soil disturbed was quite significant. And going to look at all of those parcels was also quite a significant amount of time that we spent out there. So looking into my favorite part of our department, which is blight. I don't know if I would say favorite, but it's definitely the most exciting in terms of getting out there and meeting some interesting community members. So as you know, the blight enforcement program began in 2020, 2021. It's been a couple years now. I believe it was 2020. And what we do is we don't per se have our own blight ordinance, but the townships adopt a county recommended blight ordinance. And then they sign an intergovernmental agreement with us where we enforce 2 of their complaints that they have. So one thing I've had to explain to the townships is that they adopted this blight ordinance, so they can also enforce it. If they want to send a letter, they can. If they want to talk to the property owner, they absolutely can. What we do is we take basically 2 of their worst cases or more of their timely cases, and we will handle the enforcement process for them. So as I mentioned, we started at 4 townships, and then we've significantly grown over the past few years. So some of those townships that I listed earlier did not submit a complaint in 2023. So I just listed the townships that we actually had cases for. So total, we had 8 cases that were submitted. And then the one for Alba is actually a case that carried over from the previous year. And it's just been more of one of our difficult cases that we've had to handle.
Really?
So currently at the end of 2023, we had 4 cases that were officially open. So what that means is that we're still enforcing them. The other ones had their final inspections, but maybe some of the paperwork wasn't necessarily complete, or we still had to send a letter to let them know, hey, you're in compliance. But as of 2023, we actually had 4 that were officially open. We were able to close 3 of them from 2023, and then another one from 2022 that was open still. So we were able to close 4 in 2023. And that last column where it says in prosecution, this doesn't mean that these cases are necessarily have like court hearings scheduled. These are just cases where we have had to send a letter from the prosecutor. Thankfully, none of them have gone to court as of yet. We're trying to work with these people. We're not trying to hang them up by their toes and get all the money out of them. We're just trying to help them clean up their property. And the help in letters from prosecution are great because sometimes it gives them a little scare and it lets them know that we're serious. We're not just going to send you a letter and then forget about you in 3 weeks kind of thing. But yeah, so if you look at the right chart there at our inspections, so you'll see that it doesn't fairly show that there's a standard amount of inspections that we've completed. And I wanted to note that typically there are 3 inspections that we ideally want to do per case. That's the preliminary inspection, and that's when we first go out, we look at the property and we're making sure that this actually does fall under blight conditions. That we're not going on a wild goose chase. The second inspection that we want to do is typically in the middle of the work that we're doing with the property owner. And that's just to make sure that they're continuing along with the process of bringing their property back into compliance. The third inspection that we want to complete is that final inspection where we give them a gold star, say thank you very much, and then we leave them alone for the rest of the time, hopefully. That's the goal, is those 3 inspections. Unfortunately, that is not reality. So as you can see, our one case in Elba has 14 inspections on its own. And that 14 inspections was not just in 23. That is from the time that case opened. And it is one of our more difficult cases just because there's compliance in the beginning, and then there's a little bit of lag, and then the gentleman wasn't wanting to comply, and then he was complying. So it's been a little bit of a back and forth. But it just requires us to stay on top of the property owner, basically to encourage him more to get the work done. And bring.
Driven by recently?
Huh?
Have you driven by recently?
Bill has. I don't go out in the winter. He says it looks great, right? No, we did receive not necessarily a second complaint, but in addition to the initial complaint about the gentleman's property. But then if you look at like New Haven, where we had 2 cases that were submitted and we've only had 4 inspections, that's because it's not necessarily an easier case or a more in compliance case. It's because we realized that we can go so far, but if they're not going to contact us, if the property owners are not going to reach out to us after we make multiple attempts of communication, we're not going to spend the county's gas or the township's money to go do 5 or 6 inspections when the property isn't going to change. And we can tell it's not going to change. The first step that we need is obviously to complete our preliminary inspection, but then communication is the hardest part for us. Just getting these property owners to communicate with us, to reach out, to acknowledge that they even got our notices. And we don't necessarily need to go on site to get that.
You guys relay all that to your township supervisors?
To an extent, yes. So what they get is like an update letter on their cases periodically. If there's no movement or if we need further information from them, they'll get an update. Sometimes they reach out to us as well. Yeah,
Gets talked about a lot at meetings.
I can imagine. Yeah. Some of it's just a communication aspect of they may not quite understand what our limitations are. So we just have to basically just educate the townships on what exactly we can do. A lot of complaints that we receive, part of the complaint form is, what do you want to see happen to this property? And a lot of it is just tear down the building and start fresh. And unfortunately, we can't just tell someone to tear down their house or take down their pole barn. Especially when, if you actually look at it and you take away all the weeds and the rust, it's actually structurally sound. It just looks terrible because this person's not taking care of it. So a big part of it is just the education piece. But yeah, townships, I believe we actually, technically 2024 is when we received it, but we did receive a complaint from the village of Parrington, if I'm not mistaken. So that is a new case. That's our first one of 2024. And it looks
About it last night?
yeah, yes, very excited. And what they mentioned was the fact that they have also sent their own letters, which is great. Because knowing that they started that initial communication, I mean, that's just the first step right there. And obviously they're bringing in extra enforcement, but the fact that they took that initiative themselves is a great sign to Bill and I, because that means that they're understanding that they also have the power to handle this. Yeah.
Been out there personally to see that one.
I did actually.
That might take a few inspections to get that.
Yeah.
Wow.
So this is just a little comparison on the cases that we've received over the past 3 years. So as you can see on the left, that's the actual blight cases, the status of them. So as the years progressed, each year we received more and more complaints that were actually submitted. That is partially because of the increase in the number of townships and villages that we actually serve, but also partially because they actually took notice that our program was working, that our enforcement policy was kind of getting, I guess you could say, heard about. Because we did have yeah, go ahead.
Do you think it's actually working better now that, because at first it wasn't the township that could submit the actual complaint, it had to be assigned by a citizen. And the numbers were not coming in. I think Wheeler was the only one that actually had some people that signed the thing and sent it in. Once you open the door to allow the village of Parrington, the village of Ashley, the township of Alba to be the complainant because they were getting so much.
Yeah, no.
I think that has helped this blight do what you really wanted it to do. Because a lot of people, especially the one in Alba, were afraid, I mean, in fear. And I think, you know, they came to meetings, they were genuinely in fear, where that if the township stepped up and did it, they were totally in support. The prosecutor and I were at that meeting and it was really very obvious at that meeting, if the township was willing, they were 100% behind it, but they were not going to sign their name and put their address on something for fear of retaliation, so.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, all of the documents that we obtain outside of like driver's licenses, which we don't get or anything like that. It's, I mean, anyone can FOIA request that. Anyone can ask us who submitted this complaint, whatnot. And it's much easier to say the township did it and blame the township than it is to say, oh, my next door neighbor did it, or the person down the street with the kids did it. Like, you don't
Not all
want to
counties
know.
have done that, and
Right.
it causes trouble, because I know of a couple counties north of here that refuses to do what you guys have done, and they have a mess on their hands of places that it takes somebody real brave-hearted to sign their name on the dotted line that they're not gonna look at it anymore. Because then their mailbox gets smashed and those get broken in their house, things of that nature, so.
Yes, I won't say that this is typical of the nature of property owners that we deal with. But I will say a good portion of the property owners that we are handling, the reason their property is in this condition for the first place is because A, they grew up around it, or they inherited the property from a family member, and that's just the situation it was in, so why change it? So most of these people are not bad people. They're not all angry people. If they are angry or dangerous or a little bit scary, we typically hear about it prior to even doing our first inspection. Someone somewhere, whether it's on the township, whether it's in one of the offices, they know who this person is if they've caused trouble. But most of the cases that we receive, it's just someone who may not have the capabilities to take care of the situation on their property. And one of the things that Bill and I are able to do is provide a list of different services, whether it's a tow truck company, whether it's like a discount dumpster phone number. We can just provide these resources and give them that extra push to clean up their property and bring it back into compliance. So if you look at the right side of the screen, it talks about the inspection / hours worked based on the year. In 21 and 2022, we spent a little bit more time and more inspections. I will say this is partially because we were new to the program itself, and we thought we had to go out a lot more frequently than maybe we actually needed to. But as we've progressed with the actual program and the increase in cases, we've been able to develop a process where we're not necessarily wasting our resources, but we're utilizing them to the best that we can. Which is great, obviously, because we want to use our resources and not waste them.
So that's just hours during inspections or hours total?
Like during inspections, the actual paperwork part, I mean, I can't really track if 15 minutes to write a letter.
But we do, the county spends a significant, much larger amount of time than what's just
Yes.
Yes.
created right there on this. one.
Yes, I would say, if I were to guess.
Not asking you to guess on it. I just,
Yeah.
if anybody's watching, I want them to know that I probably have 40 hours into it last year. So,
Yeah.
the prosecutor, of course.
Whether it's meetings, whether it's reviewing, whether it's a phone call with the property owner, there's a lot that goes into it beyond the inspections.
Mhm.
Any questions on our blight program? Because now I'm going to cover a couple of our cases. I've done this the past year that I've done this. And I'm gonna give you an example of what we would call a simple case. And then I'm gonna give you an example of a difficult case. And I actually relabeled it earlier today to extremely difficult because it is extremely difficult. It is not an exaggeration. So first we'll look at our simple case here. And I didn't give you any identifying information besides the case number. And that's just because if you want to come and ask me about it or come and look at these files, you're more than welcome to. But I don't want to put anyone's information out there, put them on the spot. So this case, the initial complaint, it included, there's tires, there's buckets, there's building material laying around. They're upset about a chicken coop. They're upset about scrap and then one inoperable vehicle. So this case was actually submitted March 30th of last year. And if you'll note, the final inspection was May 16th. So we actually had a turnaround time of less than 3 months for this case, which was great. When we made that initial inspection, Bill was able to start a communication with the property owner, and they were more than willing to be compliant. They signed a compliance agreement. which includes a plan for how they could bring their property back into compliance with the blight ordinance. So there were a few inspections included in this. I was able to go out on the second inspection. And they did have some tires out there. I think there's 3 or 4. And to give you an idea of what this property looked like, it was more of like a narrow slot where it had their house, it had their carport, and then they had a long backyard where they had like a chicken coop and a little garden. So that's the kind of property that we were looking at. They had 4 tires leaning against the side of their house. We asked them to store that within their carport, and they did that while we were still standing there. They had some buckets out there, and they actually had tomatoes in them. So we were gonna ask them to basically tear apart their above ground garden, but we did ask them to move it towards the back of the property necessarily, so it wasn't necessarily visible for their neighbors. The other part was building material, which technically you cannot have building material outside just laying around for more than 30 days unless you have a building permit. So that wasn't just a blight aspect, that was also kind of building code aspect. And they moved that within their carport as well. It just turned out that they were building an addition to their chicken coop. Which to get to the chicken coop, that is not necessarily a blight violation. So that was an education piece for the complainant, was that while it's not necessarily the most appealing thing to look at, if you're not used to chickens running around, or if you're not used to the type of habitat that they live in, it's also not necessarily blight on a property. And this property was located in Wheeler, and it was kind of on the outskirts. So you could say that it was residential, you could say that it was towards agricultural, but in their zoning ordinance, it was allowed, so this person was allowed to have a chicken coop and the chickens that they had. In regards to the scrap, we did not locate any scrap out there, but I think what they were referring to was this like old lawnmower that they had, and like a couple other yard tools, and they all were still operable. So one of the things that we check is to see if these things are still usable for the purposes that they were intended. If they were, we might ask them to store it within a building, but we don't necessarily require them to remove it from their property. And then that last one, the inoperable vehicle that we received as part of the complaint, it was just a vehicle that didn't have a tire because he was changing it as we walked up to his property. I think he'd had it there for about a week. He just hadn't gotten it to it yet. So we just asked him that if he were to work on his vehicle again, it's technically required to have it done within 48 hours. So we just asked him to keep that in mind in the future. So again, this case was simple because it was quick, it was easy. The property owner was almost grateful that we came to them in a positive manner. Like, we didn't immediately attack them or say, hey, you need to get this off your property. They were very compliant and very communicative. Like, as soon as they got that first letter, they called us, which is a rarity. Some people just toss it or don't open it. So that would be one of our simple cases. So our difficult case, this lovely case that we received, the initial complaint was misleading. It said trash was piling up and people are living in a camping trailer, no sewer hookups. So I will note that when I read this complaint and I was initially processing it, I said to myself, okay, well, camping trailer with no sewer hookups, that's not constituted as blight. That's either zoning or the health department. So I can contact them and let them know, but I can't necessarily enforce it. And trash piling up, okay, we'll give this guy some resources in regards to discount dumpsters or trash services. And if they need someone who is willing to help them even load it up into a trailer, there are plenty of people who have offered their services or donated their trailer so that people can take it to the dump, whether it's in Elmo or Mount Pleasant or whatnot. Again, this was misleading. So this case was submitted in July 21st of 2023. Our initial issue that we ran into was we were unable to locate the property owner. So it was actually a rental property. And even though there are people living on it, they do not own it. So we cannot go after them based on the fact that they are occupants in the current language that we have. So we have to contact the property owner and we can ask the occupant to remove the stuff, but we can't technically make them. And most of them pick up on the fact that we're not going to make them because they're not the property owner. Or they tell us it's not ours, it's our landlord's. So the next part that yeah, go ahead.
When can that language be changed?
We're currently working on revising the ordinance.
It'd be a great time to revise that.
So the next problem that we ran into was we sent 2 letters initially via certified mail and then also regular mail. And one was returned, and the language on it was written that property owner is deceased. And I didn't know what that meant, but then I realized they were trying to say deceased. So we confirmed that the property owner is deceased. But then who do you go after then? Usually it's the next of kin or whoever is willed that property. Unfortunately, the information that we received for the next of kin, no one ever responded to a phone call. They don't live at that address anymore. They never took it to probate court to change ownership of the property. So at this point, we did post a notice on the property in hopes that the renters will at least direct us to whoever they're sending their money to. But this case is obviously still open. We're kind of at a standstill, and it's frustrating not only on our end because we're putting so many resources into this, but also because we don't want the townships to feel like we're not doing the work for them. It's just a matter of all of us are putting in what we can, and there's no results that are coming from it.
Township is this one?
Sumner? Did you think it would be the Elbow one?
No, that's another location in Elba that just happens to be sort of mine, but hey, whatever.
Yep. It was Sumner. It is an unfortunate situation.
Someday I'm gonna come and get you. We're gonna go for a field trip.
Listen, Bill made sure to tell me that all of you are welcome to go along on ride-alongs, whether you want to look at the building part of our job, the soil erosion, the zoning, or the blight, you're more than welcome to do.
Flight will be way more fun than all that other stuff.
I mean, absolutely. It is a little bit more interesting, a little bit more activity.
Mhm.
Okay, so any questions on our blight program before I move on to buildings and grounds? Perfect. All right, so again, buildings and grounds is obviously its own separate department. We're just going to touch base on a couple of the projects that they completed in 2023. A couple of things that they handled was the water softener for the jail. They replaced some safety glass there. The basement and the courthouse needed some waterproofing. The entry door sweeper needed to be replaced. They were able to cap some water and drain lines in the health department after they took out a sink in there. The sink wasn't necessary. And they capped the lines because maybe at some point in the future, a sink would need to go in and you don't want to have to reroute everything. We painted community development, so I'm sure most of you are aware, but community development moved from across the street at 118 South Main to the old equalization office. And the colors there and the paint was peeling. So they repainted that. If you want to come check it out, feel free. Electrical work was completed over at animal control, and then the mechanical room and community development, our office actually had an asbestos test done by Bid State Asbestos Removal. They're very quick, very efficient. Thankfully, the tests came back negative.
It says buildings and grounds, but I'm pretty sure Deandra painted it.
I did. Not that I don't trust them, but I also wanted to make sure it's the color I wanted and could live with. No, they did have Wesley who assists them with certain projects. He did help me with that project as well. And I will say one thing about Wesley is he is a hard worker and he does not complain a whole lot, which is very great. But yeah, so those are just some of the projects that Buildings and Grounds completed in 2023. They may not seem like major projects per se, such as a capital improvement project, but they were important nonetheless. And obviously Buildings and Grounds does a number of things. And sometimes people think it's just a matter of delivering toilet paper or changing a light bulb. But as you can see, it's way beyond that. And the amount of buildings that the county owns, as well as the grounds that we own, and the fact that these guys oversee it, they do a great job of making sure that everything runs smoothly. All right, so looking at the future of our department, I promise this is the second to last slide, so I'm almost done talking. So looking at future capital improvement projects, this is for 2024 / further on. These are just what's on the horizon for them. There's obviously carpet replacement and painting. So most or some of you know about the carpet and painting cyclical plan. And that's basically just like a 10-year plan where like we paint this office now, they're good for 12 years, we move on for this office, so on and so forth. And that's just for making sure that the aesthetic of the courthouse is maintained as well as is able to catch any potential damage or repairs, because we just want where we work and where the community comes into to look nice. The next part is the tree removal. Need to get some drainage in the supply room, seal the blacktop, LED lighting conversion. The amount I've heard about LED lighting from Tony is astounding and more than I probably ever needed to know. And then replacing the courthouse windows. In terms of continuing education for our department, this is specific to community development. We take digital and in-person classes and presentations. We attend all of these. They are required for our certifications. So there are 9 days a year where Tony and Bill are absolutely not in the office, and that's because they are maintaining their certifications. And then for citizen planner and zoning administrator, I did not realize when I was learning and earning these certificates, but I am also required at continued education. And that falls under new laws or new zoning cases that come through because they affect how we might change our zoning ordinance or affect how we plan our master plan in general. So those have been some interesting cases and classes. And then office development. So one of the things that I like to focus on is reviewing and analyzing our processes, just making sure that we're doing everything we can the most efficiently. Because as I mentioned earlier, the funds that we generate are specifically for the operations of our office. So I don't want to, I want to be able to verify to whoever asks, this is where the money for your permit is going. This is what we're doing for you. So when you're paying for our service, it's more than just a paper. It's for the education that we use and us looking at your codes. Another part is reviewing and analyzing state code updates. So there is more updates than I ever expected when I was first starting my certification. Tony and I actually are part of UpCodes. And UpCodes is specific to building, but they also have mechanical, electrical, and plumbing. And every month they will send us an update in regards to the codes of our area. So if a code is ever changed or anything, we immediately know, which is quite important, especially when you're building a house or a new structure. But yeah, so that is our department. I just threw a bunch of information at you, but do any of you have any questions?
Comment. I haven't been on the board long, but this was by far the best presentation. I actually understand a lot more about your position and your office than I ever have before. So thank you, because it was well done. That one, like I now have a better understanding of your office. So great job with that.
And I want to tell you too, you did a great job. I really enjoyed reading all of this and I've been here for a while, but it was fun to read it and bring me up to date.
So, yeah. And again, I will mention this a second time just because Bill loves ride-alongs. If any of you ever want to go on a ride-along, whether it's building, zoning, soil erosion, or blight, just reach out to our office. We can schedule you in whenever we have an inspection scheduled, and you can go out and see what we do.
I'm gonna get a bus to go on the blade one.
Do it this summer when
Be
schools
hard.
and stuff.
Prosecutor will come along.
Yeah, Sheriff.
I know she has. That's what I'm saying. She'll come along. This will be a grand old time. You'll have a whole bunch of us.
We could stop at the park and have a picnic even.
There you go. We can go to your water park, Jan.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deandra.
Patient Deandra. Oh, we got a resolution.
Yep. Would you like me to read this resolution since it pertains to one of my townships
Sure.
and my old next door neighbor? So, resolution 24-315, honoring Thomas Bradley for 55 years of outstanding service for Elba Township. Whereas Thomas Bradley, over the past 55 years, has been a strong yet fair leader and advocate for Elba Township. And whereas Thomas Bradley has brought to fruition lifetime visions improving the quality of life of Elba Township residents, including but not limited to the creation of the Ashley District Library, the establishment of the Elba Township Hall, the replacement of each of the Maple River bridges, the endless support for local fire and rescue departments, including the creation of the Ashley Area Fire Authority, assistance in the formation of 911 services, the expertise provided on numerous drain projects, and whereas Thomas Bradley had overcome his personal distaste for advanced technologies to ensure his township was equipped with the technology to necessary to compete in current times, and whereas Thomas Bradley always balanced short-term and long-term goals to best benefit the residents of Elba Township, and whereas Thomas Bradley has been and always will be a wealth of historical knowledge for the history and trajectory of Elba Township, and whereas Thomas Bradley, after 55 years of exceptional service to the residents of Elba Township, is retiring. Now, therefore, be it resolved that all members of the Gratiot County Board of Commissioners honor and recognize Thomas Bradley and his commitments to the ideals of service to the recreation of Elba Township and Gratiot County.
Thanks, Thomas Bradley.
He's quite a person. His wife was just at my house the other day and he is planning on being there to receive this. And I let her in on that I was attempting to try and get one from the state of Michigan for him as well. And they were actually doing a little research on whether this is the longest continuous serving public official in state history, because they didn't know of any. It's not as easy as you might think to check that, but it's definitely, and to find out how he got it, he actually, the reason it's an odd number of years is he was assigned after his father passed away, who had been, his dad died in a farming accident and his dad was Thomas. And so when he passed away, the board came to him and asked him if he would fill in his dad's shoes, and he's never let up since then. So, he's been doing that a long time.
Pretty amazing.
Mhm.
We need a motion.
Yeah, we need a motion to adopt it.
I so move that we accept the resolution 24-315 honoring Thomas Bradley for 55 years of outstanding service for Elba Township.
Motion by Steve, seconded by Jan. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye. And he'll be presented if any of you are planning on going on the 15th to, which is Wednesday, the 15th, to the Township Association meeting at Pine River.
Isn't that oh yeah, the 15th.
The 15th, yep.
Yeah, I plan on being there.
Yep.
Okay, that's great.
I don't think we have any other unfinished business, do we?
Do you want a motion to move into the?
We need to do something for the planning commission.
Oh,
Or is that just?
No,
it's just
Okay, very good.
yep.
Thank you.
Do you want a motion to go into closed session?
Yes.
What you're looking for? I so move that we leave the regular board meeting and enter into closed session